For a whole week, my house was dead quiet, not a peep from anyone. It all kicked off last Tuesday when the door slammed shut right after we ate dinner. No heads up, no fight beforehand, just this icy, deliberate silence that felt like a toxic cloud hanging over everything. Every time I said, "Good morning," she'd just turn her back on me. Any question I asked got nothing but the sound of her shoes clicking as she walked off. At first, I was convinced something awful had gone down. I scrolled through her social media, hit up her friends, even gave her mom a call. They all gave me the same line, "She's doing just fine, far as we can tell." That's when it hit me, this wasn't about talking things out, it was her way of pulling the strings. I'm no psychic, never said I was. 3 years into this marriage, and somehow I'm supposed to crack the code on what I did wrong this time. Was it because I stayed late at the office last week, or maybe I forgot to rave about the new throw pillows in the living room? Heck, maybe I was breathing too loud during her TV shows. By the third day, I was done trying. Getting shut down over and over was starting to feel like a kick to my pride. I started making my own dinners, crashing in the guest bedroom, and living like I was the only one in the house. That silence. It was like another person living with us, getting bigger every day while my patience was wearing thin. On day 5, I noticed her staring at me from the kitchen while I was getting ready for work. The second our eyes locked, she turned away fast, but not before I caught a glimpse of something in her face. She was smug, like she was winning. She was getting a kick out of this mind game, seeing how long I'd put up with her immature nonsense. That night, I was flipping through old contacts on my phone when a name popped up that took me back, Samantha. We were tight growing up, even dated for a bit in college before life sent us down different roads. She had this laugh that could light up a room, the kind that made everyone around her grin. The kind of woman who walked in and owned the place without even trying. My wife met her once at a high school reunion and took an instant dislike to her. "Keep your distance from that woman," she'd ordered afterward. I went along with it to avoid a fight, like I usually do. But now, with the silent treatment dragging into day 6, something in me started to shift. A few weeks back, Samantha had messaged me, saying she'd be in town next weekend and suggesting we grab drinks to catch up. I'd brushed it off then, too swamped with work and too worried about rocking the boat at home. Her message was still sitting there, unanswered, in my inbox. I stared at my phone, the house so quiet you could hear a pin drop, except for the faint sound of my wife's favorite reality show blaring from the living room. 6 days of this cold shoulder. 6 days of her playing head games. I started typing a reply to Samantha, "You still around? I'm free tomorrow night, let's catch up." The second I sent it, I felt a spark of something I hadn't felt in ages, like I was finally calling the shots in my own life. Samantha texted back almost right away, "Was starting to think you'd ghost me. The Craftsman at 8 works." I grinned at my phone, a real smile that felt strange after a week of keeping my face blank. I glanced toward the living room where my wife was glued to her phone, acting like I was invisible. "Sounds great," I texted back. "Can't wait to see you." The next morning, I woke up feeling like a weight had lifted off my chest. Day 7 of the silent treatment, and for the first time, I didn't give a damn. I took my time in the shower, shaved with extra care, and splashed on the good cologne, the pricey stuff I only break out for big moments. As I buttoned my shirt in front of the mirror, I caught myself grinning again. Tonight wasn't about my wife's petty power trip anymore. It was about taking back my self-respect. All day at work, my phone kept buzzing with texts from Samantha. Every ping sent a jolt of excitement through me, like I was a kid again. Samantha and I swapped stories about our wild college days, caught up on what our old buddies were up to, and tiptoed right up to that risky line where friendly banter starts feeling like something more. Talking with her was so easy, a far cry from the constant tiptoeing I'd gotten used to at home. "You remember that night at Lake Morrison?" she texted me earlier. How could I not? We went swimming at midnight under a glowing full moon, her figure outlined against the water. Then she kissed me on the dock, a moment that still feels vivid. That was a decade ago, before life got heavy with bills and responsibilities. Before I ever met my wife. When I got home that evening, my wife was in the kitchen, fixing herself some dinner, clearly not planning to share. I stood in the doorway for a second, watching her. The way she pointedly ignored me felt like she was putting on a show. 7 days straight now. A full week of her punishing me for something I didn't even know I'd done. I brushed past her to the bedroom to get ready for my night out. While I was picking out a jacket, I heard her footsteps stop just outside the door. She was peeking in, probably wondering why I was getting all dressed up out of the blue. Normally, by this point, I'd be groveling, begging her to talk to me and end this silent nonsense, but not tonight. My phone pinged with a new text from Samantha. I left it unlocked on the bed while I swapped shirts, fully aware my wife could see the screen from where she was lurking. Samantha had sent a selfie from the bar, looking drop-dead gorgeous. Red dress, that bold smile that always drew eyes. Her message said, "So excited to see you. Like we're back in the old days." When I turned, my wife was right there in the doorway, arms folded tight. I could see the questions swirling in her eyes, a little tightness in her jaw, but still not a peep from her. Silence was still her go-to weapon. "Works for me." "Don't wait up," I said with a coolness I hadn't felt in ages, striding past her with a newfound swagger. The sharp scent of my cologne hung in the air as I went. I caught her reflection in the hallway mirror, her face showed confusion, maybe even a flicker of concern for the first time. The drive to the Craftsman gave me a chance to think things over. Was I being a bit spiteful? Maybe. But after countless rounds of her manipulative silent treatments over the tiniest things, whether I'd actually messed up or not, I was done. A marriage that runs on punishment and control isn't a team effort, it's a tug-of-war. When I pulled up, Samantha was already at the bar, holding everyone's attention like she always did. A few guys were clearly trying to chat her up, but when she spotted me, her face broke into a huge smile. She hopped off her stool and gave me a hug, holding on just long enough to stir up old feelings. "You look incredible," I told her, meaning every word. "You're not looking too shabby yourself," she shot back, her eyes giving me a once-over with a playful grin. "Honestly, I didn't think you'd show. Figured you'd lost that spark." Her teasing had an edge, like she was daring me. The guys she knew back in college wouldn't have put up with the way my wife's been acting. Somewhere along the line, I'd let myself get buried under the weight of keeping the peace at home. "People grow," I said, waving the bartender over. "But sometimes they find their way back to who they were." A few drinks in, Samantha leaned in close, her hand resting on my arm so we could hear each other over the loud music. The familiar whiff of her perfume hit me like a wave, dragging up a ton of old memories. My phone kept buzzing in my pocket, annoying me. I checked it and saw 5 texts from my wife, the first time she'd reached out in a week. "Where are you at? Who's with you? Why aren't you texting back? Hey. Can you grab some milk on your way home?" That last one almost made me laugh out loud. Typical that I wasn't going to break the silence with some groveling apology, she'd have to come at me with something real instead. I slid my phone back into my pocket, ignoring her texts completely. "You good?" Samantha asked, picking up on the shift in my face. I grinned, feeling more sure of my next step than I had in a long time. "Better than good. How about we keep this chat going somewhere else?" She arched an eyebrow, a playful glint in her eyes. "Your place." I knocked back the last of my drink and nodded. "Yup. My place it is." Driving home with Samantha in the passenger seat felt like a live wire was humming through me. Her perfume swirled in the car, blending with the faint burn of whiskey and the thrill of what might come next. She rested her hand on my thigh as I drove, her touch bold and familiar, like no time had passed. I eased off the gas a bit, going just under the speed limit to stretch out these moments before whatever chaos was waiting at home. "So, she really hasn't said a word to you for a whole week?" Samantha asked, shaking her head like she couldn't wrap her mind around it. And you've got no clue why. That's her game, I said, making the turn onto my street. I'm supposed to play detective, figure out what I did, then beg for her forgiveness. It's been the same routine for years. And you've just dealt with it because. Her question lingered, heavy in the air. Why had I put up with it for so long? The mind games, the emotional tug-of-war, always watching my step. At some point, I'd convinced myself that keeping the peace, no matter the cost, was worth it, that love meant swallowing toxic behavior. Habit, I said after a pause, and the dumb hope that if I tried harder, things would magically get better. Samantha gave my thigh a gentle squeeze. The guy I knew back in college. He'd never let anyone walk all over him like that. Her words hit hard because they were dead on. I'd changed, shaved off bits of myself to keep the peace until I barely knew the guy staring back in the mirror. But tonight, that was done. When we rolled into the driveway, every light in the house was blazing. I could see my wife's silhouette shifting behind the living room curtains. I glanced at my phone, 12 missed calls and 23 texts in just the last hour. Her silent treatment was clearly over, at least on her end, but I hadn't bothered replying to a single one. You ready for this? Samantha asked, her face a mix of worry and a spark of thrill. More than you know, I said, cutting the engine. We stepped through the front door, and there was my wife, standing in the hallway with her arms crossed so tight it looked like she might snap. The shock on her face when she saw Samantha next to me was almost funny, eyes wide, mouth slightly open, like she'd been caught off guard in a movie scene. Guess who I bumped into, I said, all relaxed, as I helped Samantha slip off her coat. You remember Samantha from that college reunion, don't you? The wall clock ticked loud in the heavy silence. 1 minute dragged by. Then 2. My wife's eyes flicked back and forth between us, her brain clearly racing to make sense of this curveball. 3 minutes of this weird standoff. Samantha just smiled, cool as ever, like the tension didn't faze her one bit. Your place is gorgeous, she said, nodding toward the living room. That painting especially, is it an original? She strolled over to check it out, her heels clicking sharp on the hardwood. 5 minutes now. My wife stood there like a statue, her silent treatment no longer a power move but more like she was frozen in place. I headed to the kitchen, grabbing 3 wine glasses from the cabinet. Red or white? I called out, fully aware I was stirring the pot. Red for me, Samantha replied, now poking around the bookshelves. Oh, look at this, Fitzgerald's collected works. We used to go back and forth for hours about his best book, didn't we? 6 minutes. My wife trailed me into the kitchen, her steps stiff, like she was moving on autopilot that I could feel my wife's glare burning a hole in my back as I popped the cork on a bottle of Cabernet. When I spun around, the raw anger in her face was impossible to miss, yet she still didn't say a word. Samantha strolled into the kitchen, leaning against the doorframe with that easy, unshakable confidence of hers. You know, I was just telling your husband how much I've missed our talks, she said smoothly. Nobody gets my brain firing on all cylinders quite like he does. And just like that, the dam broke, 6 minutes and 43 seconds, to be precise. What's she doing in our house? My wife exploded, her voice bursting out with such force it practically rattled the wine glasses. I passed Samantha a glass before responding, keeping my tone light. Wow, found your voice pretty quick, huh? Guess a week of silence really does wonders for the pipes. My wife's face turned beet red. You brought her into our home. I took a slow sip of wine, locking eyes with her over the glass. Here I thought you'd forgotten I existed, what with you ignoring me all week. Funny how that changes. Samantha gave a small cough, breaking the moment. Maybe I should step out, let you two hash this out. No way, I said sharply, my gaze still fixed on my wife. Samantha's my guest, and she's welcome here. My wife's eyes narrowed into slits, her voice dripping with accusation. You know exactly what you're pulling. Do I now? I shot back, setting my glass down with a soft clink. Because for 7 days, I've been in the dark, getting punished for some mystery offense. So, please, fill me in, what's my crime this time? The kitchen went quiet again, but this wasn't the cold, evasive silence from before, this one crackled with tension, like a storm about to break. My wife's eyes flicked to Samantha, then back to me, and I could see it dawning on her, she'd lost her grip on this little game she'd been playing. You did this on purpose, she whispered, her voice shaking with fury. You brought her here to get back at me. Samantha sipped her wine, watching us like she was studying a chess match, her expression calm but intrigued. Having another woman in our house, especially one my wife had explicitly told me to steer clear of, had done in 7 minutes what I couldn't in 7 days, it shattered her wall of silence. I stepped closer to my wife, dropping my voice to a low, steady tone. Get back at you. That's a bold claim from someone who's been messing with my head for a week straight. Tell me, how's it feel to get a dose of your own medicine? My wife's face twisted with a mix of anger and shock, her carefully built facade from the past week crumbling to dust. She slammed her hand on the counter, making the glasses jump. How dare you? You know damn well why I was mad at you. I raised an eyebrow, keeping my cool. News to me. That's the whole problem. But since you're finally talking, why don't you clue me in now that I'm apparently worth your words again? Samantha leaned casually against the kitchen island, her eyes tracking our back and forth with a kind of quiet fascination. Her being there was like tossing a match into a pile of dry leaves, and we all felt the heat. I can't believe you'd stoop this low, my wife hissed, her voice quivering. Bringing her into our house, knowing how I feel about her. Oh, I'm well aware, I said, taking another sip of wine. Just like I'm aware of how much you love using silence to punish me. Funny how fast you can talk when something finally pushes your buttons. Samantha cleared her throat again, her voice soft but deliberate. You know, the silent treatment's actually a form of emotional manipulation. Psychologically, it creates this vibe of rejection and isolation. My wife's head whipped toward her, eyes blazing. Nobody asked for your opinion. This is between me and my husband. Is it, though? I cut in, my tone sharp. Because for the last week, there's been nothing between us. You made damn sure of that. The kitchen went dead quiet again, the air thick with tension. Samantha took a calm sip of her wine, completely unfazed by the hostility rolling off my wife in waves. I had to give her props, she held her ground without a hint of apology for being there. You planned this to stab me in the back, my wife said, her voice quieter now but sharp with blame. I just asked an old friend over for a drink, I shot back. If that's twisting a knife in you, maybe that's more about your own doubts than what I was trying to do. My wife's eyes tightened into slits. Old friend? That's what we're calling her these days. Samantha flashed a small, knowing smile. We've known each other forever, way before you came along. Her words hit like a well-aimed dart, and I saw my wife's back go rigid, her mind racing. She'd spent 7 days wielding silence like a weapon, so sure she had the upper hand, never expecting I'd flip the script on her. You need to go, my wife snapped at Samantha, trying to claw back some control. That's not your call, I said, my voice steady and firm. This is my house too, even if you've been treating me like I'm some ghost you can't stand to see for a week. Samantha set her wine glass down with a soft clink. You know, I should probably get going, got an early meeting tomorrow. She turned to me with a warm grin. Thanks for tonight, though. It was awesome reconnecting. The way she lingered on reconnecting was vague enough to let my wife's imagination run wild. I walked her to the door, feeling my wife's stare tracking us like a hawk. At the threshold, Samantha gave me a hug, holding on just long enough to make a statement. She leaned in and whispered, loud enough for my wife to catch from where she was lingering in the hallway, give me a call tomorrow. This was a blast. When I shut the door and turned back, my wife was standing there, arms crossed, practically vibrating with rage. How could you humiliate me like this? The nerve of her question almost made me chuckle. Humiliate you? That's a bold one coming from someone who's acted like I'm invisible for 7 days. You were glued to your phone the whole weekend when my parents were here, she burst out. You barely said 2 words to anyone. Do you have any idea how mortifying that was for me? So that was the big reveal, the crime behind her week-long mind game. I'd checked work emails during her parents' endless 6-hour visit. That's your excuse for 7 days of the cold shoulder? I had a critical work deadline. I told you that before they even showed up. You've always got some reason, she fired back. You never make my family a priority. I took a deep breath, keeping my cool. Let me break this down. Instead of just telling me you were pissed, you chose to ice me out for a week. No talking, no chance to fix anything, just straight-up emotional head games. She scoffed, rolling her eyes. It's not a game. I just needed some space. Space is saying, hey, I need a breather. What you did was punish me, plain and simple. I started up the stairs, my voice steady. And bringing Samantha here. That was me giving you a taste of what it's like when someone else pulls a power move. My wife trailed after me, her voice rising. Are you sleeping with her? You don't get to vanish from our marriage for a week and then demand to know what's going on in my life, I said, my tone icy. Your life. I'm your wife. Are you, though? I stopped on the stairs, turning to face her. Because a wife actually talks to her husband. She doesn't weaponize silence and dangle emotional connection like it's a bargaining chip. Her face softened just a bit, the first hint that my words were cutting through her wall of anger. So what now? You're gonna start hanging out with her to punish me? I shook my head, keeping my voice steady. This isn't about Samantha. It's about respect, or the lack of it, and how we've been treating each other. Last night was me holding up a mirror to show you what your silence feels like from my side. By wounding me, she said, her voice breaking a little. By making you feel what I've been dealing with, I corrected, not backing down. Confused, shut out, pissed off, humiliated, ring any bells? We stood there on the staircase, the balance of power in our marriage shifted for good. For once, I wasn't groveling for her forgiveness or scrambling to make things right when I hadn't even done anything wrong. We need to sit down and really talk about where this relationship is going, I said, my tone final. As I started up the stairs, she grabbed my arm. Hold on, you can't just, I gently but firmly pulled my arm free. I waited 7 days for you to decide I was worth a single word. You can wait until tomorrow for us to hash this out. When morning came, a weird kind of calm had settled over the house. I'd slept better in the guest room than I had in our bed in months, like a weight had lifted just by calling out the toxic nonsense instead of dodging it. I showered, got dressed, and headed downstairs to find my wife already at the kitchen table, her hands clutching a coffee mug, her eyes red like she hadn't slept a wink. We've got to talk, she said as I walked in. Yeah, we do. I poured myself a coffee and sat across from her, keeping enough space to stay clear-headed. Too many times before, these talks ended with her crying, me apologizing, and nothing actually getting fixed. She brushed her hair back, looking nervous. You humiliated me last night. Bringing that woman into our house was straight-up disrespectful. I took a slow sip of coffee, letting her words hang there for a moment before answering. Funny how you kick things off by pointing fingers at me instead of owning up to what you've been doing for a week. That's a new one. Or is it? Tell me how it's not. My voice stayed calm, measured. She squirmed in her seat, looking uneasy. I was mad about something. I needed a break. A break is saying, I need some time to myself. What you did was punish me, setting me up to suffer until I guessed what rule I broke and begged you to let it go. I leaned in just a bit. That's not a partnership. That's you playing mind games. You're blowing this out of proportion, she said with a scoff. It wasn't that big a deal. 7 days of being treated like I'm not even here, ignored in my own house, talking to thin air, that's not a big deal. I shook my head. If I pulled that on you, would you be okay with it? Her eyes dropped to her coffee, and she didn't answer. This silence was different, more reflective, not the weaponized kind she'd been using. Listen, I went on, last night wasn't about Samantha. It was about giving you a taste of your own medicine, feeling lost, jealous, helpless. Did you like it? Because that's been my whole week. So it was payback, she said, her voice getting sharp again. No, it was a wake-up call. Sometimes you've gotta see your own actions thrown back at you to get how much they hurt. I paused, collecting my thoughts. We can't keep going like this. These loops of you shutting me out, me tiptoeing around, you using our connection like a bargaining chip, it's killing whatever we used to have. Her face softened a touch, like she was starting to see the truth in what I was saying. I don't know how to talk when I'm mad, she admitted quietly. That's not a free pass, I said, keeping my tone steady but not harsh. If you want this marriage to have a fighting chance, that's something you've got to work on. We're not kids. Shutting me out isn't a fix, it's a slow poison. She snapped her head up, her eyes flashing. And dragging your ex into our house is your idea of grown-up communication? I'm not saying it was perfect, I replied. It was a deliberate move to snap us out of this toxic cycle. And guess what? It worked. Look at us, finally digging into the real problems. My phone buzzed on the table, a text from Samantha, hope last night didn't blow up too bad. Here if you need me. My wife's eyes zeroed in on the screen before I could flip it over, her lips pressing into a thin line. Are you sleeping with her? She asked, her voice caught somewhere between a challenge and raw fear. No, I said, straight up honest. But the fact that your mind jumps there shows how shattered the trust is between us. She shot up from her chair, pacing the kitchen like a caged animal. What am I supposed to think? You link up with her the second things get rough between us. Rough? I echoed, almost laughing at the understatement. You built this mess. You decided to slam the door on talking, using silence to punish me. Choices have fallout. You can't just check out of this marriage whenever you feel like it and expect me to eat it. So what's next? She demanded, her voice sharp. You're teaching me a lesson by holding a knife to our marriage. I let out a heavy sigh. This isn't a threat, it's a line in the sand. I'm done living like this. No more silent treatments, no more head games, no more getting punished for stuff I didn't even know I did. It ends now, or I'm out. Her face went pale, and I could tell she was finally getting that I meant business. The old routine, her getting mad, me smoothing things over, was broken for good. You toss our marriage away over this? She asked, her voice shaking. I'm not the one chipping away at it, I said. Every time you pick manipulation over straight talk, you're the one doing the damage. I stood up, putting some space between us to match the emotional gap that had been growing for months. I deserve better. We both do. She reached for my hand, her fingers hesitant. I don't want to lose you. I didn't pull away, but I didn't grab her hand back either. Then show me. Not with promises, but with how you act. No more freezing me out. No more emotional tug-of-war. If something's eating at you, say it. If we've got a problem, we deal with it like adults. And what about her? She asked, unable to even say Samantha's name. Samantha was a spark, not the fire. But my friendships? They're not up for debate anymore. Trust is a two-way street. I slipped my phone into my pocket. I'm gonna crash at my brother's for a few days. We both need a breather, real space, not your punishing silence, to figure out what we want from this marriage. Shock flashed across her face. You're walking out. I'm taking a step back, I said, throwing her own excuse back at her, the irony hitting us both. When I come back, we either commit to fixing this the right way, or we face the fact that it's too broken to save. As I threw some clothes into a bag upstairs, I heard her sobbing in the kitchen. In the past, those tears would have had me running to her side, ready to comfort her and say sorry for upsetting her, even if I wasn't the problem. Not this time. Sometimes, loving someone means refusing to play along with the patterns that hurt you both. 3 months have gone by since that morning in the kitchen. 3 months of big changes, some tough, some freeing. My week at my brother's place turned into 2 as I realized how much clearer everything felt with a little distance. For the first time in ages, I could actually hear my own thoughts without constantly worrying about how she'd react to every little thing. Those first few days, my phone blew up with her calls and texts, everything from tear-soaked apologies to sharp, angry jabs. The old me would have hightailed it back home the second she sounded upset. Instead, I stood my ground. I'll come back when we're both ready to sit down and talk honestly about where we're headed. 2 weeks later, we decided to meet up at a quiet coffee shop downtown, neutral territory. She looked different, smaller, less sure of herself. The woman who turned silence into a weapon now seemed to struggle to find words that carried weight. I started seeing a therapist, she said after we grabbed our coffees and sat down. Twice a week. That caught me off guard. That's a big step. What made you do it? You walking out, she said, nervously tracing the edge of her cup. I never thought you'd actually leave. It hit me hard, made me see how many relationships I've trashed with these habits. We talked for 3 hours that day, really talked, maybe for the first time since we said our vows. She told me she grew up watching her mom use silence to control people, and she'd soaked it up as just how relationships work. It didn't excuse what she'd done, but it gave me a piece of the puzzle I'd never had before. I moved back home, but I was cautious, like stepping onto thin ice. We set firm rules, no more silent treatment, ever, counseling every other week, and straight up, honest talk, even when it felt messy. The first few weeks were like relearning how to walk after a bad fall, clumsy, sometimes painful, but we were getting stronger. Then one night, she spotted a harmless text from Samantha on my phone, just a quick check-in, nothing more. That old, icy look crept over her face. For 2 hours, she went quiet, pulling back into herself, but this time, she stopped short. I'm feeling jealous and insecure, she said at last, the words clearly hard to push out. I know it's not logical, but seeing her name takes me back to that night and how close I came to losing you. It was a step forward, no question. But one good moment doesn't undo years of deep-rooted patterns. 2 weeks later, we got into it over holiday plans, and when I woke up the next morning, the silence was back. The cold shoulder, the way she wouldn't meet my eyes, the whole act of pretending I wasn't there. It only lasted a day before she said sorry, but that was one day too many. Some habits don't break, they just keep dragging you down until you walk away. Yesterday, I signed a lease on a new apartment. Today, while she was at work, I packed up the essentials I'd need to start fresh. Not everything, that'll come later, once the lawyers sort out the details, just enough to move on. I left a letter on the table, not full of anger or blame, just laying it out straight. I'd given our marriage one last shot, set clear lines, and those lines got crossed. Respecting myself meant doing something about it, not handing out endless do-overs. My phone pinged as I set my keys on the kitchen counter of my new place. A text from Samantha popped up, still good for dinner tonight? Found this killer Thai spot downtown. Over the past few months, we'd rekindled a friendship, nothing more than that. It was a careful reconnection, picking up the pieces of a bond that used to mean a lot. While I was still trying to salvage my marriage, I hadn't been open to anything beyond platonic with her. But now, with the burden of that crumbling relationship finally off my shoulders, I felt a spark of something new stirring. Can't wait, I texted back, pulling the door shut behind me for the last time. As I drove away, my phone started blowing up with calls, my soon-to-be ex, probably walking in to find my letter. Another round of her silence was coming, but it wasn't my problem anymore. I muted the ringer without even glancing at the screen. The toughest thing I've learned is that you can't make someone respect you. All you can do is walk away from places where respect's nowhere to be found. Leaving isn't giving up, it's the ultimate way to protect yourself. That night at the restaurant, Samantha grinned as I walked up to her table. "You look different," she said, tilting her head. "Like you're carrying less weight." "I feel it," I said, sliding into the chair across from her. "Like I finally dropped a load I've been hauling around for years." She studied me for a second, her eyes curious. "Any regrets?" I thought about it, really let the question sink in. The last 3 years weren't all bad, there'd been some happy times, some meaning woven in between the mind games and power struggles. But those good moments had been drowned out by the toxic habits we couldn't shake. "Just one," I said after a pause. "I wish I'd realized sooner that I deserved better and set some damn boundaries." Samantha lifted her glass, a smile playing on her lips. "To boundaries, then, and to whatever's around the corner." I tapped my glass against hers, feeling something I hadn't in ages, the easy, no-strings joy of being around someone who got me, who saw me for who I was and liked it. It wasn't the start of something set in stone, but it was the end of settling for less than I deserved. Some folks might say my choice to walk away was harsh or heartless. I say it was essential. Real strength isn't about how much crap you can take, it's about knowing when to stop taking it and start living again. That's the end of this chapter of my life. If you've stuck with me through this whole story, I appreciate it more than you know. I've got a couple other tales I think you'd vibe with, and I'd love for you to check them out. I'll be here, ready to share the next one whenever you're back. Catch you soon.